Yes, so go ahead. Julie, go ahead. Speak.
I would like your attention, please. The forum is about to begin.
Perfect. Does that work?
Testing my mic.
Go ahead.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Does it sound okay?
Sounds great. Thank you. Yes.
Candidate Workman's trying to take my job away from me.
We do have the overflow room meeting room seat.
Good, good. Before we begin tonight, I'm just going to give a few announcements. So I should turn to that page. Welcome, everybody. I want to just remind you that campaign literature or buttons or anything related to the candidates is not allowed inside the room. There, that helps. But you can set up material outside or see material outside for the candidates. If you are Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Enid Weichselbaum. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters Rochester. I'd like to welcome all of you here tonight, the members of our audience, the people that are viewing at home, and of course our candidates. We'd also like to thank our generous partners tonight. With this forum is being presented by the Rochester League of Women Voters. Our partners are the Rochester Post-Bulletin, the Rochester Chamber of Commerce, and the Rochester Public Library. The League of Women Voters is a volunteer organization organized at the state, the local, and national levels. We encourage our citizens to participate in government. While we as a league do study and take stands on certain issues, we never endorse a candidate, we never endorse a political party. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters or any of our partners tonight. The sponsorship of the forum is not an endorsement of any candidate or any party. It is our purpose in sponsoring this forum to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss face-to-face issues that are important to you. Tonight's questions have come from the League of Women Voters, the Post-Bulletin, and the Chamber of Commerce. However, each of the partners is only going to ask one question. All of the other questions are going to come from online submissions or from the audience. You are welcome to submit as many questions, written questions for the candidates as you like. hold up the cards that you have, and a volunteer will pick it up for you. If you're watching on live stream, you may email questions to lwvrochester@lwvmn.org. Tonight's volunteers who are managing the questions are also League volunteers. Questions that are submitted that are unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature will not be used. Given our format, your questions must relate to both candidates. Questions that fall into the same general area or have been addressed either in a previous question or in opening statements may be consolidated to allow the moderator to cover as many topics as possible. We appreciate questions that are forward-looking rather than a review of past issues. If an answer is unclear to you, feel free to submit a follow-up question or ask the candidate after the forum. The cards that you submit will become property of the League of Women Voters Rochester. There's never enough time to cover all the issues in a limited time and setting such as this. Please feel free to contact the candidate's campaign headquarters directly if your questions are not addressed tonight. We'd like to thank the candidates for running for office, for taking the time and dedication that running and serving your community requires. We encourage all of our members, as individuals, as we encourage all of you, to get involved in the community and the political party of your choice. Welcome to tonight's forum, which features the candidates for Rochester School Board Seat 4. Candidates for this seat are Julie Workman and John Whelan. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to offer an opening statement. The candidates will then respond in turn to questions provided by the League of Women Voters, this evening's partners, and then by the audience. Candidates will have 75 seconds for each answer. The candidates will have then just 2 minutes each to make a closing statement. I'd like to suggest to candidates to be as succinct as possible. You don't have to use the entire 75 seconds to answer your question. We would like to cover as many topics tonight as possible. Each candidate also has 3 30-second rebuttal cards. They can be used at any point after each candidate has answered the question. Only 1 rebuttal card may be used per question. Please put the card in the basket after you've used it. I'd like to remind the audience to remain quiet during the forum. Hold your applause till the end of the forum and turn off all of your electronic devices. The timekeepers tonight are League of Women Voters volunteers, April Horn and Maddie Weist. Questions are going to be screened by League of Women Voters members Mary Jones and Dee Valdal. Our questions will be asked by me, Enid Weichselbaum, from the Post Bulletin, Jordan Shearer, and from the Chamber of Commerce. They were unable to come tonight, but the Chamber has sent in their questions. So those are the evening's credits for tonight. We have, by luck of the draw, determined who should go first in their opening statement, and candidate Whelan got the low number on that, so candidate Whelan will go first on his opening statement, and you may begin.
Thank you, Enid. I'm going to dispense with the usual thank yous to all of the various players here, because we've had a development come up in the last several hours. We received a communication. I'm John Whelan with foryourchildren.org is our website. We received a communication from a teacher, and this is what it said. Hello. Please understand I'm an anonymous teacher who wishes to stay anonymous. Today I realized none of my students can access your website using their student accounts on the Rochester Public Schools district-issued devices because the information technology platform of the Rochester Public Schools has blocked your website. This seems wrong to me. In response to that teacher, I say, this is wrong. This is cancellation. This is cancel culture. And for voters who work in the school district and students who are old enough to vote, I think it could fall into the category of voter suppression. We will be looking into this because we double-checked it with several other employees who we have favorable relationships with, and they confirmed to us that and we have a screenshot of it, the current operation is blocked by your IT administrator. This is very disturbing, and we will delve into it more. I'm looking forward to the debate as it unfolds. John Whelan, foryourchildren.org.
Thank you. And candidate Workman.
Good evening. Thanks to the League of Women Voters, the Public Library, the Chamber, the Post Bulletin, and the community for this opportunity to answer questions. My name is Julie Workman, and I was first elected to position 4 on the school board in 2010. The voters have supported me for 3 election cycles, in part because they know that I know and understand the facts, I know what's important, and I tell the truth. I don't make stuff up. I make decisions based on data, research, and consider different perspectives from those we serve. I make decisions on information applicable to our students, to our staff, to our parents, to our community, based on what is happening here, not somewhere else. Here's a simple example of how the slate gets it wrong and why this is important. The slate asserts that the board decided on its own to build new schools and that it ignored some declining enrollment. Fact, the board can't make that decision on its own, but after many months of study and much input, it can and did ask the public to decide in a referendum vote on November 5th, 2019, which was overwhelmingly supported and occurred before the pandemic. The slate faults the board for ignoring some declining enrollment before it happened. This occurred after the voter approved referendum, after construction began, after the pandemic hit. Is the slate in some kind of omniscient, clairvoyant, or convoluted time warp to know things before they occur? Shame on the slate. Does it not know the facts in the timeline? Does it not care, or does it lie? Since for whatever reason the slate can't or won't get simple facts right, what can we expect on difficult and complex issues? Details matter, facts matter, truth matters. If the slate can't or won't get something this simple right, what else is it getting wrong? This election is the opportunity for the community to decide what matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the first question for the questions portion of our event will come from the League of Women Voters. And we are going to begin at random starting points. We're going to begin with candidate Workman. And the question is, as a school board member, how would you respond to parents' concerns about what is being taught in the classroom?
Start with your kid. Ask them specific questions at home about what they are learning at school. Don't say, "How is school?" and be satisfied with a shrug or a grunt or a dismissive "fine." Be interested in their learning as frequently as possible. Be interested in their homework assignments. Make sure that you keep up with notifications through Skyward and papers that are buried in the bottom of their backpack. If there is a sensitive or potentially controversial area of study coming, parents get advance notice. They then have the option for their child to opt out and request an alternative assignment. This has been the practice for decades. However, the parent can only opt out their child from the sensitive, controversial topic, not everyone in the classroom. If the parent does wish to remove material from the curriculum or from the library, there is a process to follow, starting with a teacher or building principal. It is very specific. The slate was complaining about how burdensome the process is, but I know that I, as a parent, would not be deterred to make this request.
Thank you. Candidate Whelan.
Thank you. We are big proponents of parental rights. Under Minnesota statutes, the parent has the primary responsibility for the education of the child. In essence, they turn that responsibility over to the schools, but that does not mean that they let go of their intent for their child to be educated in the way that they intend to get the best education. What we want to do is make the public schools work for all the students, not just students of a particular ideological stripe. We want to ramp up the academics and shove down the politics. Get the politics out of the school, get the academics increased. We have seen a tremendous decrease in academic proficiency. I spent a lot of time at Century High School. I was done coaching there in 2011, and at that time we had the top academic tennis team in the entire state of Minnesota. I'll talk more about the decline in proficiency in the Rochester schools over the last 10 years.
Thank you. Our next question will come from the Post Bulletin. We'll begin with candidate Whelan.
During such a divided election, what would you say to voters who do not share your views, and how would you plan to communicate with those voters if you were to become elected to the board?
As you can see from my opening statement, Jordan, we're very concerned about free expression of speech. This is a hallmark of our country, and it's guaranteed by the United States Constitution. It's so important that it was the First Amendment to our Constitution. If we are successful in this bid, we will respect the other side. We'll respect opinions from the other side. We will work together collaboratively, and we will not browbeat or bully people who do not agree with us. Unfortunately, we have seen in several other smaller school districts very close to Rochester, Pine Island, Byron, also up to Lakeville, and particularly in Hastings, that the other ideological side has browbeat and bullied and canceled their opponents. We do not operate that way. We're saying they've had it this way for many, many years. We're offering you an alternative to do it another way.
Thank you. Candidate Workman.
There are many means of communication open to the public, starting with speaking during the public comment times at board meetings. Did I have the question right? Could you repeat it?
Yes. Different views.
What would you say to voters who do not share your views, and how would you plan to communicate with those families if you were to be reelected?
Okay, thank you. I got distracted with all the information about surrounding school districts. So the public has lots of opportunities to communicate to the board. One of them is through the public comment time. They have 3 minutes to speak, and generally we do not have a response to them during this time. The board chair always offers to talk with them, have a phone call, whatever. However, that communication is not limited to the board chair. The community is free to call any school board member at any time for any reason. Email communication works as well. So when I listen to people, I really try and put myself into their shoes and see things from their perspective. I've really learned a lot, and I've been able to change my perspective on many different issues as a result. I think it's important that we have civil discourse in sharing information with each other and responding to each other. I really hope that with the diversity we have in Rochester, that we can really ramp up those conversations, because we all come from different cultures and different experiences.
Thank you. Our next question is coming from the Rochester Chamber of Commerce. It's been sent in to us. We're going to begin with candidate Workman. How would you work to engage with local businesses and organizations to grow opportunities for students' career exploration? What role do you believe the school district should play in workforce development?
The school district can always expand its partnerships in the community. We already have quite a few partnerships with local businesses, and for example, the Mayo Clinic comes in and does a health clinic for us at the Alternative Learning Center. There are opportunities for students to have mentorships in the community, but I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is the development of CTEC a number of years ago, where students really have the opportunity to explore things that they might not have chosen otherwise. Maybe they would like to find out about welding and then have an opportunity to have an internship in the community, or they are thinking about being a teacher, and they can be in the classroom with a teacher and getting to know kids. So we do have those opportunities. I think they're very important. I welcome businesses that will come to the district and express their interest in sharing those opportunities with us.
Thank you. Candidate Whelan.
Thank you. And I echo your sentiment on CTEC. I had conversations with previous board members, and they were very high on it. I don't have a great deal of knowledge on it because you can ask my wife. I can't pound a nail. Actually, my neighbor is in the here, and he does all that stuff for me. So, but it's very important that we have people that can do that type of work and that are talented in that area, and there's tremendous opportunity. The only thing I would say about CTEC is that I would want to expand it even more. I think it's limited in its offerings right now. I have talked to several businessmen who are concerned about the basic skills of current students in the Rochester Public Schools and graduates. Skills of basic math proficiency, and also interpersonal skills. Now, I'm biased in this area, but I believe that interpersonal skills could be ramped up incredibly by focusing on extracurricular activities, because I was a sports coach for a combined 13 years at the middle school and high school level. I think that's extremely important.
Thank you. Our next question is coming from the audience, and we're going to begin with candidate Whelan. If you are elected, what would the top 3 things that you would like to achieve be?
We need better academic proficiency. The rankings are distressing, to say the least. I mentioned earlier that back in about 2010, our Century tennis team was the top-ranked academic tennis team in the state of Minnesota. The school as a whole ranked 20th in the state. 9 years later, in 2019, and this is before the pandemic, this is pre-COVID, that ranking had fallen to 118 in the state of Minnesota when you look at all of the high schools in the state. Mayo and John Marshall have even lower ratings, and in the interest of time, I can't go into all the numbers there. Secondly, we have to instill discipline in our students. Nothing in life of any consequence is accomplished without discipline. And we cannot have a prosecution-free autonomous zone in the Rochester Public Schools. The Post-Bulletin agrees with us, and we followed up agreeing with them. That is extremely important.
Thank you.
I didn't get to number 3. I'll try to get it on another one.
Thank you. Candidate Workman?
Academics are always the focus of education. The Rochester Public Schools has recently started the implementation of our strategic plan, where academics are first. However, there are many things that help kids learn. One of them, and I'm glad that you touched on this earlier, is interpersonal skills, social and emotional learning. This starts at a young age. How do people treat each other? Can we say please? Can we thank you? Did we really learn everything we needed to know in kindergarten? Hold hands when you cross the street. Stick together. Wash your hands before you eat. Flush. That sounds maybe a little bit silly, but it is very important for people to have the skills that they need in order to feel successful in school. And when they feel like they belong, then they can achieve.
Thank you, and we have a rebuttal.
I'm all for please and thank you and you're welcome and all those types of things. What I'm not for is students cursing out teachers. And we even have an anecdotal that the superintendent himself got flooded with four-letter words in the hallway of one of our schools. I was not an eyewitness to that, but we do have a report on that. We cannot have this kind of behavior. It goes way beyond please and thank you. There need to be consequences for behavior like this, and this needs to be gotten under control, and we will do so.
Thank you. Our next question comes from our online audience. We will begin with candidate Whelan. What is your opinion about the separation of church and state?
The separation of church and state it does not appear in any of our founding documents. It was a letter written by Thomas Jefferson to, I was going to look up who that was, it slips me right now, and he talked about a wall of separation. It needs to be looked at in context. Our founding fathers came from countries where there were state-mandated religions, the Church of England, whatever the church might be in the country that they came from. They wanted to get away from that, and rightly so. And so they missed it in the original Constitution, but in the very first amendment to the Constitution, they said, Congress shall pass no law establishing a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So what has happened in the public schools has been through Supreme Court rulings, and what I want to avoid in the public schools is the establishment of any religion, and that could be secular humanism. So we want a broad-based where students are free to have religious expression privately.
Thank you. Candidate Whelan, Workman?
I was going to say, you don't get twice, do you?
No, I
Okay,
misspoke.
thank you. Students already have the opportunity to express their religious beliefs privately in school. As a matter of fact, I think they've been doing that for decades every time they take a test. Aside from that, I agree, there should be no indoctrination of religion in the public schools. This can... We have a policy, 609, that deals with how students can leave school for religious education. I think it's up to 3 hours a week. And that they can meet with each other during non-class time. They can have clubs after school for their religious expression. I do not believe in indoctrination of any kind in the public schools.
Thank you. Our next question revolves, actually, I'm going to switch that. We have several questions here on the budget. And I'm going to take these several questions and put them in two groups. First of all, what are some options you would pursue to secure more funding for our district? And we will begin with candidate Workman.
I love this question. I think it's important for the community and voters to understand that the school district has very little control over its funding. Our funding is determined by the state of Minnesota. We have a legislative committee that started last year that met with legislators and we shared with them what our legislative priorities were for the district and the board that we had developed. So the legislature is really the place to start for funding. I don't think that, bake sales are going to cut it anymore. This last session, there was a big budget surplus, and it's still sitting on the table. A lot had been proposed for education. There had been agreements made, and those weren't followed. As for other funding, there's always philanthropic funding, but the problem with that is we can't depend on that from one year to the next to the next. So the legislature is where our public funding is at.
Thank you. And candidate Whelan.
We need to be smarter with our finances that we do have control of. If we don't have control of the money coming from the state, we need to be smart about what we do have control over. I was stunned to hear a story from a credible source, a previous employee, that the Harriet Bishop School in Country Club Manor, you may recall that that was the subject of the 2019 referendum, and the idea was that that school would be torn down and replaced. After the referendum was passed, on the backs of the local taxpayers, $500,000 in renovations were made to the old building, which then was torn down within 2 years. That is not a wise use of taxpayer money. That is a scandal. We also have many stories of furniture, exercise equipment, and books being thrown into dumpsters. These could be sent out to not-for-profit organizations or sent home with kids in the case of books. This is wasteful.
Thank you.
Would you repeat the?
I already did.
Oh, your answer, but you're on first for the next question. It's still about the budget, unless you had a rebuttal. Okay. We're still on the budget. We'll begin with candidate Workman. What are the first areas you would target for cuts in the anticipated upcoming budget cuts?
That's asking a lot of one board member to make a decision about what I would choose to cut. My hope would be that we would be able to follow what is in the strategic plan and stick to the programs that are in the strategic plan to keep any budget cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. We have balanced the budget for the 2022-2023 school year with our $23 million debt has been accounted for. Some of you are sitting here shaking your heads, but it's all in the budget book. You can see it online. For this coming year, the district will be working on making more cuts to the budget with input from the community on perhaps how some of that should be done. But the third year is when it gets really sticky. The third year, we will not be able to balance the budget, which we will need about $20 million to do. And so it's very likely that a referendum will have to be posed to the public to vote on whether or not they would like to increase this amount of money or to make some very, very significant cuts.
Thank you. And candidate Whelan.
I believe that there are many areas that can be cut that are superfluous to the goal of the school district, which is to educate students for a productive adult life. Let's get all the superfluous things out of the way. That I do agree that we need mental health services. We live in a community that is the envy of the whole world with our healthcare system. We have outside resources for things like that. A referendum with groceries the way they are, with inflation the way it is at 40-year highs, That is a lot to ask of our hardworking taxpayers. And with some of the examples I gave in the previous question of waste by this district, I think it's quite bold of them to be talking about a referendum. One thing that we would do, as in a practical sense, is that we would roll back the school board salaries to what they were before the current board more than doubled their salaries. Now, just so you know, no one could live on a school board salary, but that is leading by example.
Thank you. And we have a rebuttal.
I'll address this last question first. That budget or that salary compensation for the school board of $7,600 was set in 1986. How many of you are still at your same salary that you were in 1986? Most of us aren't. When that was adjusted, we adjusted it for less than what the inflation was. I feel that the work that we do on the school board deserves compensation. It's hard work, it's involved, and it takes hours. As opposed to the superfluous cuts, I would like to know what they are.
And we have a rebuttal? No?
I don't think so.
Okay. You're fiddling with the card there.
Yes, I was.
I'm paying attention. Next question revolves around safety. We're going to begin with candidate Whelan. The recent swatting incidents in Rochester and across the state brought school safety and the threat of violence, of gun violence, very close to home for many. As a school board member, what should the top priority of our own school district be to ensure the safety of students and staff?
So we discussed this when we talked about getting a handle on violence by instilling discipline. We want to partner with local law enforcement. We believe that we should have a true police presence in most of the schools. We'll have to look at it at a case-by-case basis, and that they would be uniformed. I think a healthy, I've heard about, well, that scares the children. Well, you know, if I run a red light and there's a police car sitting here and he just saw me go through that red light, yes, that scares the heck out of me. But I think that's a healthy fear. And safety goes beyond just the things we think about with threats on, you know, like you mentioned with the swatting incident or gun safety. It goes into areas where children can be put at risk. And I think we're doing some things in the school right now that put children at risk, and I would say specifically gender-neutral bathrooms. I see no reason for any such thing, and I think there's going to be a catastrophe, and if the school district's in financial trouble now, they'll be in huge financial trouble from that.
Thank you. Candidate Workman.
Swatting is a difficult thing to control, and we can't. It's relatively new. It happened across the country on that day last week when Lourdes High School was locked down for a while, and there was concern at Mayo High School because a student actually saw somebody in the parking lot with a gun. That person was a police officer in an unmarked car. As for having more police officers in our schools, we have a wonderful program with our school resource officers. They are trained to learn to deal with children, to understand them, to form relationships with them. However, the SRO officers do not discipline children. They are not charged, they are not in charge of any kind of they can't determine what the consequences are for a child who misbehaves. Both parties in this agreement acknowledge that an SRO in a traditional law enforcement uniform can trigger an emotional response from some students and staff. This is what the Rochester Police Department and the school district say. Just because you're not feeling upset or challenged doesn't mean that there are other children, I don't mean your child, others who are not concerned about this.
And we have a rebuttal.
I think there needs to be clear lines of authority. There's a saying that, are the inmates running the asylum? The adults need to be running the schools. And we cannot have children running wild. We've talked to many, many ESPs, the former paraprofessionals, kids cursing them out, screaming at them, saying, you can't touch me, because they know that they can get away with it. These policies need to be changed. We need to insert common sense into these policies. Thank you.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. No questions from the audience unless it comes in like this. Our next question is, ma'am, can I ask you to be silent, please? The next question is regarding book bans. And we're going to begin with candidate Workman. There's been a recent movement to restrict access to books for students in public schools. How would you respond as an RPS school board member to requests for book banning in this district? Again, we're beginning with candidate Workman.
Of course, it depends on what the book is. We have a process for that, where those materials can be challenged and removed. The process does take some time from the time that the original request comes through to a determination is approximately 30 days. The parent would talk with the principal. They fill out some forms about what the book is, why they object to it. They are required to put it all in context rather than just taking out a specific phrase. This then goes to the reconsideration committee, which is formed up of community members and some school district staff. Their decision is final. It may be appealed. The process may be appealed to the school board, but the school board will determine only if that process was followed correctly. I think it's helpful when we have a group of community members who actually do determine this. I think that book banning should be rare. I think that inappropriate materials should not be in a particular classroom. And I think that our teachers are generally pretty good about this. But if a parent does have a concern, talk to the teacher first.
Thank you. Candidate Whelan.
I think we have some common ground here. When I heard age appropriate, I'm very concerned about books that are not age appropriate. Single-digit age kids with books that are highly sexual in nature. This is not appropriate. And there can be differences on that at the middle school level and the high school level. But we are not in the business of book banning. I think, as you saw from my opening statement, there might be some banning going on from the other direction. We believe in free speech, and we believe in free expression. But we also do not believe in indoctrination. I think we had some common ground there, too. We believe that statements such as the equity statement and the government speech statement, which were adopted by this board within the last 2 years, are horrific statements that violate basic constitutional principles and force students to think a certain way and to believe a certain way. And we are completely against those statements.
Thank you. And candidate Workman.
Oh, I'm not rebutting yet.
Okay.
Would you repeat the question again?
I'm
I guess I didn't. No, didn't we finish that question? We both answered.
Oh, you did. I'm so
Okay,
sorry.
so
I'm
I can have
sorry.
I can do my rebuttal?
You want a rebuttal?
Yes. How long is it?
30 seconds?
30 seconds, okay. Once again, if there is material in your child's classroom that you don't think is age appropriate, that you think is sexually explicit, there is a process for challenging that. There is a process for challenging it. Just because you think it's not appropriate doesn't mean that everybody doesn't think it's appropriate. So I'm really concerned that there's been just a lot of exaggeration about some of these materials, which I haven't seen and which haven't been produced to me, shown to me to be a problem.
Thank you, and you have a rebuttal.
Well, we have seen them, and we've seen them listed on the books, and we didn't want to, but we went out and bought some of them so that we.
Sorry.
Okay. We have seen them on the lists of the elementary libraries, and we have bought some, and we have shown them to people when we show up at their door asking for their vote. And there's a diversity of opinion with the people we talk to, but it's overwhelmingly shock.
Thank you. And we have to conclude our questions at that point. At this point, it's time for closing statements. Candidate Workman will go first.
I am running for re-election to the Rochester School Board Position 4 in order to advance the comprehensive, cohesive, and carefully considered work that the board and district are doing to ensure that students learn and thrive. The district's top priorities are comprehensively outlined in the 2022 through 2025 strategic plan, Planning for Purpose, in the School Climate and Safety Plan, and in the 3-year budget plan. Some key issues within these plans include a multi-tiered approach to academic achievement, improving the safety and well-being of students and staff, and transforming school and family engagement in order to inspire, challenge, and empower our students to become their best selves. If re-elected, I will continue to focus my energy on communicating to staff, families, students, and the community the progress of these priorities and initiatives. I will continue to thoroughly prepare for school board meetings and ensure I have all the necessary information to make responsible, intelligent, sound decisions through a lens of equity, providing each student with the tools, support, and resources they need. I am informed, knowledgeable, thoughtful, and experienced in making carefully considered decisions on complex district issues. My teaching and school board experience make me extremely well-versed and uniquely qualified when making decisions in the light of facts, research, data, and best practices, while respectfully listening to and considering multiple perspectives from our diverse community. I humbly ask and thank you for your vote on or before November 8th. Please visit my website, julieworkman.org, to learn more about my key issues and priorities, and Julie Workman Rochester School Board on Facebook. There's some things on the bathrooms there, too. Literature is available on the table outside the auditorium. Thanks again to the League of Women Voters, the Public Library, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Post Bulletin for hosting this event.
Thank you. And Candidate Whelan.
And thank you, and I'll say my thank yous now to the League of Women Voters, Post Bulletin, Chamber, and to the audience here and online and who will be watching on the recording. I would ask you this. Are students, teachers, and other staff, parents, and our community at large better off than 12 years ago? That's when my opponent first took her seat on the school board. Academic decline, unacceptable and unaccountable student behavior which spills into the community at business and social ventures. I say no. I say that the taxpayers and other stakeholders are also not better off. Financial irresponsibility and continual appeals for more and more spending. I say no. We are for equality. The United States of America was built on the idea that all are created equal. Was it perfect? No. In 1776, the man who penned those words owned slaves. Women were not allowed to vote. It was not perfect. We fought a huge war in the 1860s with casualties of over 600,000. And then it took another 100 years until a visionary named Martin Luther King, whose portrait sits on the right hand of the hallway when you walk out of here. Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream that one day my children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." He said that almost 60 years ago. Why are we going backwards? Let's judge people by the content of their character. Let's educate them to the highest level of their individual potential achievement. Let us not turn Dr. King's dream into a nightmare.
Thank you. And it looks like we're reaching for a rebuttal card.
But we were.
If you wish to make a rebuttal, you may make a
There's a
rebuttal.
closing.
Yeah,
Is that a?
yes. We have a rebuttal.
Do I have
Please be silent.
10 seconds to think?
No.
No. Okay. I think this was
I'm sorry. Audience, you need to be silent.
I think this was a very extremely impassioned, well-thought speech from Mr. Whelan here. However, I'm not sure that it's fair to compare what happened in 1700 or 1800 or 1900 with the world today. I think the comments about Martin Luther King and the content of your character could be construed as being used in this manner, could be thought of as very nasty for some people.
Thank you.
Do I have anything?
Of course, you may have a rebuttal. Hey, I'm sorry. The audience need to be silent.
I thought we didn't have rebuttals to the rebuttal.
Well, we were going to make a pact that we weren't going to rebut the closings.
He is rebutting a closing.
Martin Luther King was a transformational figure in this country. Do you know that of all the national holidays that we have, the only one that is named after a native-born American is Martin Luther King Day. So I say, if you do not honor his legacy, then don't take that day off. Work.
Thank you, audience. Before we begin the next forum, we'll need to take a short break. We'll begin precisely at 7:30.